Hey, this is John. Welcome back to Modern Old School Developer. So I was going over the to-do list and there was an entry on there for updating one of the endpoints to better handle some error. And it seemed so minor I was about to just cross off the list and not do it. But then I went through the code and realized there's a lot of little places that could use a little bit of polish. So I thought we'd use this episode to go through and see what we can do about fixing some of those things to better handle the user experience. So I've made little to-dos over all of the back-end stuff, and I want to see what we can do about fixing them. So here we go. First one, trim white space. All right, so if you add an actor, a series, studio, or whatever, what if you had some white space at the beginning or end of the string? We don't really want that to be part of the database. We want it to be added without the white space. So it would be a nice user experience thing if we trim the white space before we add the name. So why don't we do that first? So let's make something that will trim the white space. Fortunately, that's really easy. All we have to do is say strip. There we go. That trims our white space. So let's look for other white space ones. So we've got that in actor. There'll be one in categories as well. So let's do that here. There'll be one for series. So we'll add a strip to that. And there'll be one for studios. So right in here somewhere. There we go. All right, cool. That gets rid of 4 of our to-dos. What else do we have? This error code is overly broad. Yeah, so, I'm not telling you whether the movie ID is wrong or the actor ID is wrong. I'm not telling you which one of those is wrong. It would be nicer if we did those things. And also, I'm thinking that we need to handle our error codes a little bit better. Returning none, I don't think was a good way to regard an error code. It kind of works, and it kind of fits in with some of the other things that we're doing. You know, if we fetch something from the database, fetch a specific thing, and it returns none, well, we know that we don't have one. But I think it would be better if we raised some kind of custom exception that we could catch. Then we'll know exactly what's happened, and we can even parse error messages from those custom exceptions. So why don't we look into doing that? So here inside our CRUD module in the add movie actor function, you can see that if either our movie is none or our actor is none, we're returning none. Well, I think it would be a better thing to do to say, if one is none, let's throw a custom exception. So let's make a new module, exceptions.python, and we'll just have some exceptions defined here. So we'll just say class invalid ID exception derives from exception, and I don't need anything special on it. It can be just the exception itself, but we'll call it this kind of ID. All right, so we've got that. So why don't we say if movie is none, we will raise invalid ID exception, and we'll give it a message, and the message is going to be movie ID does not exist. All right, there we go. So now we're going to raise an exception here instead. And then we'll get the actor, and we'll do the exact same thing. So if actor is none, raise invalid ID exception, actor ID does not exist. All right, so now we're not returning none from this anymore. So now we know that we have a movie and we have an actor, and so we can append that actor to that movie. That also means we need to handle the invalid ID exception in our main part here. So let's say that we do this. So let's say we try accept invalid ID exception as E, and here's where we're going to raise our exception, and we're going to say 404 not found. We know it's a not found exception, and the message is going to be the message that we get from the error. So we'll just convert our exception to a string, and there we go. I think that code's a lot easier to read and understand. We know what's happening. We have a specific case for which ID is invalid, and maybe both of them are, but we're not going to worry about that. If you supply either one, checks movie first, then actor. But you want to make sure that that is okay on both of them, and I want to return a specific message here. Also, I did want to point out that we do raise HTTP exceptions from several places, and I don't like that. It makes it difficult to track down where you're actually raising the REST exceptions from. So I do want to raise all REST errors from the main.py, from the endpoints themselves. So when I'm refactoring this, I'm going to have this pattern where we try to do something, and if we can't, we'll catch the specific exception and raise a REST exception that returns our status code. All right, so that takes care of that. What else do we have? Well, it's going to be very similar for the delete movie actor, so let's go fix that too. All right, so just like before, we just wrap this in the try block, in the try catch, and we catch the invalid ID exception and raise the exception just like we did before. And I believe it's going to be also for movie category as well, so I'm going to go fix those too. All right, so I updated CRUD as well, so we've got the delete movie actor, the delete movie category, and the add movie category, all throwing the invalid ID exceptions whenever we have a missing ID we try to add or delete something for the movie or the category, which we're getting by the ID. All right, so what's next? So I put a note in here about what if the movie doesn't exist. So that's what I was talking about, where if you raise the REST exceptions from different endpoints or different places in your code, it's hard to figure out what it's doing and where. I'm actually handling this inside the CRUD delete movie thing, but I didn't even realize it, and I wrote the code. So it'd be better if, this is why I think it would be better if all of the REST exceptions were raised here. So again, let's do that. So let's go into CRUD and go to the delete movie endpoint. And right here is where we were doing this 404 not found error. So instead, we're going to raise an exception here, but not this exception. We're going to raise another invalid ID exception. And it's going to be movie ID does not exist. And there we go. We're going to raise that exception instead. And that is not being handled, so we need to go handle that in our main.py. So instead, we're going to do pretty much this. So we're going to say try to delete the movie, accept invalid ID exception as E, and we're going to raise a 404 exception. And the message again, sorry, just the message. Message is going to be the string of E. And there we go. And now we know that if we got here, we definitely are successful. So yeah, I think that should be better. All right, we've got several more things like this. A lot of these conflict errors come up when we try to add a studio or actor, series, etc. So let's go work on that as well. Let's go back into our exceptions and let's make a class duplicate entry exception based on exception. So that's what we'll use for when we have one that already exists, a duplicate entry exception. So we're going to go in here, and it's going to be pretty much the same thing. We're going to try to get this, except we have a duplicate entry exception as E. And if we do that, we're still going to raise the error, but this time the detail is going to be string E. And then we'll return our studio like normal. And we're going to do this exact same thing for series, actors, and categories. So I'll go ahead and do that off camera. It's the exact same transition. All right, I've added all of the updates for the endpoints to catch the exceptions. So now we need to actually throw the exceptions if they happen. So rather than returning none here, we want to raise an exception in the add studio, add series, add category, and add actor function. So all we're going to do is raise duplicate entry exception, and we're going to give it a string, and we're going to say studio name already exists. There we go, just like that. And we're going to do the exact same thing in the series. So let's go here and put that there. Series name already exists. There we go. And one for add actor and one for add category. And again, actor name already exists. And category right there. And we can say category name already exists. All right, so that should be good for those endpoints. I did want to point out there is one exception to this pattern over here, and we do the get movie. This is our only individual getter function that has an API endpoint. We don't have one for get actor or get category. Those are all get all actors and get all categories. But we do have one thing for get the individual movie, so we get our movie properties. But here, I did not make an exception for this. I did allow movie to be none, because that still makes sense. If I get a movie that doesn't exist, it's fine to return none. And all the getters have that same behavior for all the individual ones. So we have to change all the behaviors of that if I did that. So get actor returns that, get category. These are all the same, and I prefer that they stay that way because I think it's fine to return none there if you are getting something individual. But if you are adding something, we have a special condition to do that. So I do want an exception there, but I left this alone. We could have changed it, but I think it's fine for this case here. I do notice a long time ago we made this exception here when we list files, because there's more than one thing that might happen when we do this, the OS list directory. It could be it doesn't exist, or we couldn't read it, or drive failure, or lots of things could happen here. So we did the exception here, and we raised just a base exception with this message. But let's make that a custom exception since we have those now. So let's say class list files exception, derived from exception, and again, we just say pass on that. And over in utility, we'll say this is a list files exception. All right. And back over here in main, we will say accept list files exception. And we're just going to give it whatever error we have there, the string. We're already doing that. So let's close out that and go into utility. And yeah, unable to read path and then the path name. So that looks good as well. This one might be the first time where we have a case of multiple exceptions we can handle. So if right now we're assuming that if we couldn't update the movie, it's because it didn't exist. Now that's not the only problem we might run into. We might not be able to update the file name, or there might be a lot of other things that happen when trying to update the movie. So maybe we should do a few things with that, but let's handle this exception here first. So let's put that into a try except block, and we'll accept invalid ID exception as E, and we'll say raise this exception, and we'll make this string E. All right. And there may be more things that can happen later on, but we'll just handle this for now. So let's go into CRUD into update movie. And if we are none, we will raise invalid ID exception. Movie ID does not exist. Okay, so now we are handling it the same way we were before. All right, so in our CRUD module, we've got this thing here says raise an exception. This is in our add movie thing. This would be a duplicate movie exception. So yeah, let's raise duplicate entry exception, and we'll say movie already exists. I don't know how much more clear we can be than that. I guess we can give it the integrity error. So let's say E, and then we'll say string of E. That will be good for that. So in our endpoints over here, when we add a movie, that would be for our import movies. Right now, we're saying if movie is none, we append it. But actually, this add movie might be throwing an exception. So we're probably going to need to handle that then. So we'll say try except duplicate entry exception as E. I guess we want to handle this case, so I guess we'll just go ahead and raise a conflict error here, just like we were in other places. And we're just going to raise a conflict exception, and message is going to be the string E. So there we go. And if we got past that, then we will add the movie. I'll put that up here, I think. Yeah, that looks better to me. Okay, so now if we try to import movies that already exist, we will raise a conflict exception and we'll be able to handle that somehow down the line. So I think that looks good for that. All right, what else is there in CRUD? Update processed here. Okay, this one is kind of a consequence of what we did in the last episode with parsing the file name. So if we parse the file name, it's kind of processed already. We've got all the information. But when I hit update and don't change anything, well, then our movie never gets processed. It's just at the front of the list all the time. So I want to be at the front of the list in case I want to update something, but if I don't change anything, I still want processed to change here. So rather than just return our movie, why don't we say processed is true, and let's just set that regardless. So let's set movie processed true over here, and we'll cut that out. And then all we need to do is I want to commit and refresh. So let's say we do commit. And actually, we don't need to refresh because we didn't change anything that the movie object cares about. So all we have to do is do a commit here that will update the process. Okay, so that should handle that. All right, so let's just go make sure a few of our things actually worked. So I'm going to start by removing this. All right, so we move from our movie. And our admin, I want to re-import it. We see it's now at the front of the line because it's unprocessed. If I hit update, successfully updated, and now it's at the bottom, even though I didn't change anything. And that's what I wanted to see. All right, other thing was what happens if we add a conflicting actor or something. So what if we add Chris Pine again? What happened? Chris Pine already exists. Okay, that was already kind of handled before, but it's a little bit different now, so that's still okay. So those things work. What if we imported the exact same movie? Let's try to import another copy of Avatar. So let's go to our command line. Go into our database, imports, let's touch avatar.mp4. And let's try to import that and see what happens. So if I import movies, okay, we've got this movie already exists. So that's not how I want to handle that, but at least it is telling me what happened. So yeah, it says unique constraint failed, SQL import into blah, blah, blah. I'm not entirely sure I want all that in there, but it's nice to have it. So I may just want to return this. And I still wonder what happens if we have a movie that exists and one that doesn't exist. So if we go back over here and we touch Dark Knight Rises.mp4, what happens with that? If I import, we get our conflict. Dark Knight Rises is over here. Avatar would have been first. So that's probably precluding that from happening at all. So why don't we also import Frozen and remove Avatar? And let's see what happens with that. So now I go over to import movies. We get a movie already exists. But did we get Dark Knight Rises? And I don't see that we did. So I'm curious what happened there. I see Dark Knight Rises. Oh, because of how it sorts movies with capital letters, Frozen comes before Dark Knight Rises. Okay, hang on. Dark Knight Rises. Okay, now we can try it again. All right, clear the console, import. We got an error, but it did import Dark Knight Rises. So it'll import up to the movie that fails, and I believe all of that should work. I don't see that in there. I see Dark Knight Rises over there in our movies. It's in there. So yes, we will return an error if we have any conflict, but we'll process the list up until that point. So I think that works pretty well. I definitely want to handle this error case. That's too many things to put in there. So I think I'll use the movie file name instead there. So why don't we do that? Let's go to where we were importing the movies. That's going to be inside add movie. And we were using the integrity error. So let's not do that. And what do I have now? I've got the file name. So let's just say that. Movie file name already exists. And let's try that instead. So if I hit import again, movie frozen.mp4 already exists. All right, that's a lot better. I get the information that I'm looking for, and we get our conflict error. So the errors are already handled in the front end. So yeah, that's a bit better experience for the user. And I think this is a little bit more clean code. So there are a few more things we can do like this to clean things up, but that will have to wait till next time because I think it's a good wrapping up point for today's episode. Hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.